this video done. I also find that a lot of the battle rifle videos out there are not as in-depth as they need to be. So this is not going to be for people with ADD. This is the long answer, is what you're going to get on how to pick a battle rifle. This is also going to be kind of more geared towards Canadians. Usually when you watch these battle rifle things, it's, some American guy going, buy an AK or an AR. But here in Canada, we simply are not allowed to own AKs of pretty much any variant, with the exception of a CZ858, which is not really an AK at all, but we can't. And then our AR-15s are basically quite heavy regulated. So what ends up happening with us is we do end up with a smaller gene pool of rifles that we have access to. So this is more going to be, again, towards Canadians, but however, it's more going to be about philosophies of firearms rather than saying buy this make and model because it's the best and da da da. Because everybody's purpose of use, to steal a nothing fancy term, the POU, is different. So, for example, I mean, these two rifles fit into two completely different categories, although they are both semi-automatic. So, with that said, if you're going to grab a pen, now is the time to do it. I'm going to set, especially for Canadians that are just kind of getting into the semi-automatic realm or the doomsday kind of doomsday apocalypse, zombie apocalypse, World War III, financial collapse, big giant space rocks crashing into the planet, civil unrest, who knows? And of course, the ever so dreaded teddy bear apocalypse, which is amongst us. Yes, it is coming. And I got a lot of ammo loaded, and when I go out and shoot the cobwebs out of this thing in the spring, this is going to be fun videos. But the point is that, for whatever scenario you're going to buy these, there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration. Most people don't take the most important consideration. The question that is the most important, number one, if you're buying these for anything other than hunting or target shooting, then we're talking about self-defense. So the biggest question that comes up that most people never cover in their, what rifle they should use is the question, can you commit to using a rifle in a self-defense application? What does that mean? Well, that means you may have to use up to and including lethal force. Now, in most scenarios, most people say they've already made a decision and said, yes, they can do it. Anybody can pull the trigger and stuff like that. Here's my take on it is that it's not a scenario I'd ever want to be in, period. I never want to have to shoot at anybody, nor do I ever want anybody to have to shoot at me. Or not have to, but just, be shooting at me. And I have a theory that if it takes more than 3 shots to save your life, you're probably not going to live through the ordeal anyway. But have it, not need it, need it, not have it. Now, let's ask the more serious question. The first question, before you even talk about what battle rifle you need, you have to talk about what it's going to do. Whether it's something like a 22 or a 308, it don't matter. They can both end lives. They can, and this is something you have to realize that you're going to have to live with that if you're ever in a situation. The same way a police officer or a soldier has to live with it, you're going to have to live with it. And that's one thing that, I really want people to reflect on. That what you're talking about is possibly ending lives. So I've never shot a person in my life. I never want to. But I have shot animals, okay? I'm a trapper by trade, and I'm also a hunter. So, I have shot things. So I know how messy and gory and how, even with something as powerful as that, you'd be surprised sometimes how many shots it takes to take certain animals down. Even with, expert marksmanship, sometimes they don't just drop on the spot, no matter where you hit them, including the head. So the reason why I have to bring that up is because I think a lot of people have a very Hollywood version of what it's going to be like in a WROL or WOG situation without grid, but basically an SHTF WROL situation where people are just basically, it's a free-for-all. Examples of this: Hurricane Katrina, the 1992 LA riots, stuff like that, where it was a free-for-all. Hurricane Katrina is probably the most notable one, and of course Hurricane Sandy, that's not that far down, just happened a few months ago. Yeah, there was problems. Gun confiscation didn't become the primary focus this time, just because they didn't have the manpower, that's all. Otherwise it would have. So I don't think a lot of people have a realistic version of what they're really buying these for. Now, for me, just for the record, these are bought as target rifles. I don't typically hunt with semi-automatic rifles. Varmint hunting makes more sense. Like, for example, I live close to a horse farm. I don't really know the guy, but I'm pretty sure it's only a matter of time before we get a major infestation of groundhogs because of all the cleared land. So I'm sure this thing's going to get a workout. Sometimes people, when I was a kid, would actually hire me to go clear their cow farms and horse farms and horse ranches and stuff like that. An example of this was one guy was like, he didn't believe in, firearms. He wasn't a vegan, but he didn't believe in hunting and stuff like that until his horse broke a leg in a groundhog hole, and then he was more like kind of like, kill them all, Yeah, oh yeah, he was quite fiery. Apparently, like the bone broke out of the horse's leg and everything was quite, so he understood the idea of conservation at that point. And me and a bunch of buddies went and we didn't have semi-automatics, we only had bolt actions. And, it was like playing whack-a-mole. A head would pop up, you'd shoot at it, then another one pop up. So, this would have been, a much better tool to the job. And this would have just been, 10 billion levels of overkill, which would have still been fun and great target practice. But, so that, that's one method that you could really use a semi-automatic with a high-capacity magazine very efficiently, although it's highly overlooked and under appreciated for those values. If you have, joint problems. I know one guy, there was an older guy, he had a semi-automatic shotgun because he had a really bad elbow, and although he liked the pump-action shotguns better, it was just too hard on his elbow to chamber around. So semi-automatics were great for people that have, some of these more challenges, physical challenges. So that's great. And then, of course, something like a 308 is definitely, there's not an animal on this planet that you can't kill with a well-placed shot. Plenty of power. The 22 not so much, but definitely the 308 it's not a steroid cartridge by any means, but it's definitely a decent cartridge for what it is, and more adequate for deer, bear, moose. I mean, you can drop a moose with that, no problem. And it's good long range and flat trajectory, relatively flat trajectory and stuff like that. So it's a decent rifle cartridge. Now, on the other hand, for target shooting, 308 is the availability of the 308 that makes it so appealing, and of course, the versatility of the 308. But that said, maybe not everybody can handle 308. I'm not recoil sensitive, so I'll take the punishment. I don't find it that bad, to be honest with you. But again, I'm fairly well fed, so to speak. So I can tend to take the punishment a little bit more, and of course that's almost an 11 pound rifle. It's a 10.5 pound rifle, so it takes up a lot of the recoil for me. But that said, what we're talking about today is not hunting. We're not talking about target shooting. What we're talking about is self-defense in a doomsday scenario. And I'd rather you take it from a self-defense kind of mind frame than a military or a police officer kind of mind frame, because you're going to react differently in these situations. James Yeager puts it best at however you train is what you're going to do, at a lower proficiency, in combat. So whatever you train to, the best you do, you're going to be at your worst under battle stress. Okay, but that's the worst you do is what you're going to kind of revolt back to, which makes sense in a way. Maybe I'm not explaining it properly, but because you're going to fumble things. So the better your training is, police officers and military, for example, usually only have about a 40% success rate of getting shots on target under stress. Elevated heart rate, stuff like that. So that's why they train. But maybe you won't be doing running around. You'll just be standing on your porch or something like that, and just kind of holding the fort, so to speak. So I mean, there's a lot of different things that can happen, but you still need to be able to have the mannerisms fresh in your mind and train so that you are automatically going to respond a certain way to a certain situation without having to really think about it. It's just going to be more of a reflex action. What they found is that most law enforcement and military, after 30 days of not shooting, their skills start to diminish, and they start to, they fumble, and I mean, these are guys that are professional, okay, and they train not till they get it right. They train till they can't get it wrong. And that's a different level of training. And most people, such as myself, will not be trained to that levels. A, too expensive, and B, I don't think I need to be to that level. But whatever works for you. There's some people that have to shoot 2-3 times a week. If that's what floats your boat, that's what you do. If you shoot once every couple of months, well, that's fine too, as long as you can manipulate the weapon the way you need to under certain stress levels. That said, again, take it from a self-defense point of view. Before we get into what rifles Canadians can buy and stuff like that, this is I can't stress the importance of the first and the most major and really the only question. The firearm is really kind of irrelevant. And even the training is even kind of backdoor to this, is the first thing. When that bullet leaves that barrel, okay, what's its intent? And if its intent is something that you don't normally want to do on a daily basis, that's something you're going to have to live with. So, again, I'm not trying to give anybody any ideas that they don't already have in their head, nor will I accept any responsibility for stupidity or negligence. What I'm telling you is that if you, without sugarcoating it, if you were buying these with the idea of a Doomsday rifle or whatever, again, I primarily, officially bought these as target rifles. Fun and enthusiastic. However, the fact that the bells and whistles allow me to use them as a Doomsday rifle, like they're adequate for that, it's just a bonus. Hopefully, I'll never ever have to do that. But if it ever comes down to that kind of scenario, I know these rifles will get me through that. Even the 22, don't underestimate the 22. Most people do. But the big question is as bluntly as you can put it, is when it comes down to it, can you pull the trigger? Can you actually end somebody else's life in preservation of yours and your family's? Usually most people will say yes without a hesitation, but that's if you don't think about it, because you have to think about it. How far past the point of no return do you have to get before you have to commit to that? So commitment is the big one. The reason why I put so much emphasis on that is for two reasons. Number one, you will have to live with what you do. And number two, if you can't commit to it, that's even worse. Why? Because now you've just armed you're probably going to get killed, and you've just armed a bad person with a really, adequate weapon. So you have more responsibility than you think. Your failure has consequences. So most people don't consider that, but that's before you even think of, if you can't commit to that, then on the other hand, don't buy anything, because then at least it's not a resource that's going to fall into the hands of people who wish to do ill. But if you've come to the terms and said, okay, well, like for me, I'm pretty much a pacifist person. I'm not, the last fight I got into was like in the schoolyard, you know what I mean? And even at that, I made up with my friend the next day, that's the kind of person I am. That said, I've always believed in self-defense. So with that said, we'll go to the next video. Again, this is going to be a long series because it needs to be in depth. Most people don't cover battle rifle philosophies in depth. They just say buy an AK or an AR. But why are you buying those? Those aren't the everyman's rifle, because it depends on your needs. And again, what are your gun laws? And it's up to you to know your gun laws. So I'm just going to pause it here. Okay, I find it very difficult to get this video done. I also find that a lot of the battle rifle videos out there are not as in-depth as they need to be. So this is not going to be for people with ADD. This is the long answer, is what you're going to get on how to pick a battle rifle. This is also going to be kind of more geared towards Canadians. Usually when you watch these battle rifle things, it's, some American guy going, buy an AK or an AR. But here in Canada, where we simply are not allowed to own AKs of pretty much any variant, with the exception of a CZ858, which is not really an AK at all, but we can't. And then our AR-15s are basically quite heavy regulated. So what ends up happening with us is we do end up with a smaller gene pool of rifles that we have access to. So this is more going to be, again, towards Canadians, but however, it's more going to be about philosophies of firearms, rather than saying buy this make and model because it's the best and da-da-da. Because everybody's, purpose of use, to steal a nothing fancy term, the POU, is different. So, for example, these two rifles fit into two completely different categories, although they are both semi-automatic. So, with that said, if you're going to grab a pen, now is the time to do it. I'm going to start, especially for Canadians that are just kind of getting into the semi-automatic realm or the doomsday kind of doomsday apocalypse, zombie apocalypse, World War III, financial collapse, big giant space rocks crashing into the planet, civil unrest, who knows? And of course, the ever so dreaded